Right, hello everyone. I'm Simon. Um, Obviously, for most of you, I don't really need to say who I am, but I'm the CEO of SELabs, a security testing organization. I'm a director of AMTSO and also a co-chair along with Luis Corones. And I've been testing security products one way or another publicly for over 20 years, which is why I look so young and untroubled. SELabs itself, London-based security team, very large team actually now. I think we're about 20. And we generally work with very big enterprises, most of the main security vendors as well. We know sort of Cisco, Microsoft down. Security teams, by that we mean kind of the teams that try and keep those organizations safe as well. So on one hand, a bank might want to buy a firewall, and on the other hand, their red team testers and penetration testers, we all know and like each other and share information. And of course, we talk to analysts as well. You've seen this screen loads of times. We're no longer in Croydon, we're in a much nicer place. And in fact, just today, I bumped into Ant from Ant and Deck outside. So we're in a very nice area now. The stuff we test, a whole range of different cybersecurity products, but today we're going to focus on network security appliances and specifically network detection and response. But yeah, most of you know we do endpoint. We're always doing email tests and so on and so forth. There are three main reasons that we do this work. One is actually to help the vendors improve. We know historically that some testers have taken quite an antagonistic position, whereas we try to be both unbiased but also helpful. And then their customers, the big banks and the oil companies and so on, they need security, and often their only choice is to read reviews, of which there are very few, or to do their own testing. And sometimes they'll make mistakes or they lack confidence in doing this very specialist kind of work. So we help them with that as well. And of no interest to you will be that cyber insurance risk people also ask for our help, because if an organization is not putting the right products in place or using them properly, then the chances of them being breached is potentially higher. Now, before we get onto the NDR stuff, which is today's focus, so I'll put a little red blob around that. Quite a few of you know that we do a thing called a breach response test. And what we found over the last 3 years is, I think possibly because of historical reasons, where another tester had a test called a breach detection test, we're going to stop calling it the breach response test now, because it's not just about endpoint, which is what a lot of people assume. It's network as well. We can test network products using the same general approach. We can do cloud systems as well. And of course, hybrid, so XDR and whichever way around you want to look at it. So we're calling what we do now the advanced security test. And that can be of anything, because basically we're hacking just like a hacker would. But anyway, NDR. So we did this test. It says it's a breach response detection test, but it's now the advanced security detection test. We've been doing work like this for ages and ages, but we did some work with VMware, and I think I saw Chad's name on the list. So hi, Chad. Thank you for being brave enough to take part in this with us. And actually, a lot of the products that we've seen in this space haven't been brilliant. So there are a lot of unpublished reports, and it just so happens that VMware's product did particularly well. And so to our relief, they said, please publish. And now we can actually talk publicly about network detection and response testing. So to give you a slightly clearer sense of what this means, if, as a lot of you know, when we test endpoint products, we have a network, we have a PC with, I don't know, Norton antivirus or whatever on it, and then we start hacking away, maybe downloading malware or doing phishing attacks and other things like that. But these products are designed really to sit in large networks. And in this case, we're thinking along the lines of a data center. So actually, rather than you buying one of these products, hopefully your bank would, or even your ISP, your internet service provider, would use a product like this amongst all its systems. Now, endpoints do come into it, of course, because people use remote desktop things, but you wouldn't normally have an actual PC plugged into a network like this very often. So that's generally what the test network looks like, with this thing in the middle, watching all the traffic going through and trying to detect the threats as they happen. Now, as you probably know, we always test with all the different attack chains. So you have the beginning of an attack, which could be a phishing email or something else, maybe a malicious PDF that will have an exploit in it. And then as you work your way through, being that bad guy hacker, you start sniffing around on the system. What's going on here? Maybe I can steal some information. Maybe I can escalate privileges and start logging keystrokes and capturing screenshots and that kind of thing. So we, regardless of whether we're testing an endpoint or a network device, we do all of these attack chains to see what happens. Now, of course, a network detection response product won't see some of the things an endpoint would see. So, for example, if we try and escalate privileges on a Windows virtual machine, we wouldn't expect that to generate very interesting network traffic. So you wouldn't expect a product to detect that, but you might expect it to detect what happens on the network afterwards. In the same way, if we're testing antivirus, we might not expect that to see certain command and control traffic flowing off to the internet, whereas you would expect an NDR product to see that kind of thing. But when we come up with these attacks, we don't just sit here and think, hey, what would be cool is we do this, that, and the other. We actually look at what known bad guys have done in recent months and years, and we generate attacks based on that. So, for example, we could look at Oil Rig. It's a group that's been identified targeting Arab nations, largely financial institutions, and maybe industrial as well. And they do a few things in common with each other, these groups. So in this case, they use a certain kind of cryptography to hide the traffic as they control the systems that they've been attacking. And so what we do is we look at all the different things that these guys are known to have achieved or tried to achieve, and we create variations of these to create the attacks used in a test like this. And this is the kind of result that you might see at the end of it. So if we look at the second table down, Oil Rig, you can see, let's use incident number 5. This is a test case, if you like. So in this case, the product has detected it. That's just, there's some detection has happened. So big tick at the front. But you can dig down into the details and you can say, did the product detect the attack as it was first delivered to a target? And in this case, it did. And what about the execution of that threat? Well, yes, it did. And what about the action of that threat, which could be listing files on the PC? Well, no, it didn't, but we wouldn't expect it to. So rather than having a red cross there, we have a not applicable, because a network detection system sniffing packets isn't going to know about processes running on a Windows PC. And similarly, when we escalate privileges, which is the next stage in our attack, you wouldn't expect a network device to see that. But what you might expect it to see is the behavior that we exhibit once we've escalated privileges. And in this case, it did. And you can see all these green ticks saying, yes, it did detect everything that we would expect it to detect. And regardless of what kind of product it is, we have tables like this, and we can say, well, this product had a bit of a gap with lateral movement, for example, or this one was terrible at detecting the delivery, but always detected it in the execution. And without wanting to go into too much detail, but if you want to know later, ask and I'll explain, we've grouped these together as well. So when you see delivery and execution, we've got 2 ticks there. If it detects it when it's delivered, tick. If it detects it when it's executed, tick. But when we come to score it, we're saying we've grouped these 2 together. You see that dotted line there. We're saying that only one of those is necessary. So if a detection system detects the delivery, but not the execution, or vice versa, then that's still good. So that you just need 1 tick in each group along there. And then in the reports that we do, we dig down into a lot more detail about the techniques that these guys do use and would use, and in fact anyone could use. So the screenshot here at the top you can see is from MITRE's attack framework website. So there's also a link there you can click through, and you can see how MITRE has organized all of those parts of the attack chain. And then in our own style, we've provided it as an image down at the bottom. So for example, when we do an oil rig attack in a data center, we might have a compiled HTML file. And then maybe we use PowerShell followed by some kind of process discovery process. And then we bypass UAC, and then we start keylogging. And then we use SSH to move laterally into another system and start capturing screenshots. And all of these stages, though, again, they're all listed in the back of the reports that we do. But this just demonstrates that we go absolutely from the beginning of an attack all the way to the end. So regardless of the security vendor's approach to handling threats, if they only detect privilege escalation, if they only stop execution, whatever it is, we should be able to identify and give them credit for their successes. But of course, if they claim that they stop keylogging and then we can keylog, then they will be penalized for that. A little bit about general testing in the hacking world. So some people would say, well, to compare apples to apples, you have to basically be a criminal, because if you're not a criminal, then our product won't detect you because we're designed to detect criminals. And, you know, rather embarrassingly, this is FireEye's position sort of 7 or 8 years ago. Obviously, they don't have that same position today. But what I'm saying is that close parity to what the bad guys do is possible, and actually is not just good enough, but it's all that could be done. And even in real life, you wouldn't have an attacker exactly copying his or her own behavior bit for bit every single time. There's always variation. And even if two testers did the same test, let's say Chris at MIG did a similar test, and we both want to emulate a particular APT, let's say it's APT 123, and that group is known for sending emails containing malicious Word documents with a specific exploit, XYZ. Well, we could both do that, and it would be a completely valid similar test, but the hashes of the files and a few other details wouldn't be the same, and they shouldn't be. And if a product detects the threat that I use, but doesn't detect the one that Chris uses, I think that would be quite a significant problem, because why is it catching one and not the other? Is it using hashes? Because if it is, then it's always going to be behind the curve when new threats come out. So we're saying that in real life, some consistency is good, but you don't need for it to be 100% copy of what the bad guys are doing. And I could go on about this, but I'm probably going to run out of time. But when we talk about testing, we're always talking about security testing, and we hold ourselves to a very high standard, most likely because some testers have been a little bit grumpy and don't respond to queries, and some vendors get very grumpy because they think they've made the best thing ever, and sometimes they get criticisms. But testing is never entirely 100% identical or consistent. So I don't know much about medicine, but I do know that human bodies are all different. So if you do a medical trial, you're balancing risk, because nothing is going to be 100% effective with 100% of people. And same with car tires. You could cast a rubber tire. Molecularly, it's not going to be exactly the same as every other tire. And the wind and the water molecules, as you test it on the irregular tarmac, is all going to be different too. But you do enough testing and you take reasonable steps to make things consistent, and you should get a useful, accurate and realistic test. And the same thing happens here, where we talk about the holy grail of security testing is apples to apples, bit for bit, everything's the same samples, tested at precisely the same moment. But if you think about it, even the microchips are not consistent. Even the solar radiation we get from our sun makes those chips behave differently at certain times of the day. So there's always going to be some randomness. So if we get really fixated on making everything exactly replicatable and totally predictable, particularly with malware, which is often badly written and not predictable at all, then we're going to get a bit stuck. So the thing to remember is what's actually useful to the customer. Is this product going to protect them from bad stuff happening, bad stuff that we know is likely to happen because it's already happened in a similar form. So I'll stop, I'll get off my soapbox on that one. Quickly say, before I finish, that our other bit of big news is the annual report that we're producing is coming out next week. So if you're at all interested in that, my recommendation would be to sign up to the newsletter that we have for security vendors. I think quite a few of you already are, but if you're not, that's the link. We don't send many out, only when there's something important, like a new methodology or a new kind of report or something like that. I would ask that you sign up as yourselves and not using a general catch-all email address. And the reason for that is what we find is someone will sign up with, I don't know, testing@vendor.com, and then one of their group unsubscribes or reports us as spam to MailChimp, and it makes things a bit awkward. So if you can keep it to your own accounts, that would be great. But if you want to do a group one, yeah, cool, whatever. So that's me done. Any questions?